You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. I want to talk about something that has been really in the forefront of my mind for years, something that I constantly think about and I constantly see signs of around me and within me and around me, when the people around me, the environments around me, especially in the yoga environment. Um, But before I do, I just want to also disclaimer this by letting you know that I live right next to a primary school, an elementary school. And it seems like every time I sit down to record an episode of the podcast, it coincides with the teachers letting the students out into the play area, into the yard. I mean, it's not a prison, but whatever. Um, and these kids, I mean, I don't know if you've ever actually, I mean, don't. I was going to say, I don't know if you've ever actually just hung out around a school when kids are in recess, but don't because not advisable and probably will get you in trouble. But I don't know if you live near a school. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. But when those kids go out there, and I'm talking like kids who are, I don't know, anywhere from like 5 or 6 to like 10, 11, 12. I'm telling you, these kids run around like their hair, they scream like their hair is on fire, and they run around like their feet are on fire. It is fascinating to me. There's such a social experiment waiting to be done there, but I'll leave that for someone else to do. All that to say that if you overhear, you know, high pitched frequencies in the background, I don't think the microphone's going to pick it up because I'm pretty far away from, that side of the building. But nonetheless, if they do pick it up, I'm not keeping anyone in a dungeon. This is not of my doing. These are kids being kids. You know, all the more power to them. I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Now, what I want to really talk about in this episode is the myriad of ways that we are really encouraged and conditioned by society and by the world we live in and the cultures we live in to not be in relationship with the bodies that we find ourselves in, to not pay attention to what the body is telling us, to ignore signals, and in some cases to deny signals. I believe that we're not encouraged to listen to what the body is telling us. We're not encouraged to trust it when we do. And then there are moments when we refuse to acknowledge what the body is telling us because we're in denial for fear of having to properly respond to whatever those signals are. I remember years ago, even though I've always had this yoga practice, this asana practice, well, always, I've had it for 20 years, there was a moment about 3 or 4 years ago when I thought, I should get to the gym. I should or at least do some sort of cardio exercise. And I remember giving myself all the reasons not to go. I'm already tired. This is just going to fatigue me even more. I don't have the time for it. I've done that before, and I always start and then stop and then end up paying for the full year membership, but I only go for like 3 seconds. And so I just wouldn't go. I ended up answering that call, what was it, over 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I have been there ever since, and I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with going to the gym. I fell in love with this incredible trainer who every month changes my workout, and she challenges me, and in conjunction with my osteopath, they both give me information about what muscles in my body need to be used that have not been used enough in the past, and all that to say that it's completely transformed everything. And all of those preconceived notions that I had, like I wasn't going to have enough time, or I was already tired, this would just make me more tired, those were completely dispelled. Those myths were completely dispelled when I actually started working out. Because what I found was not only did I have the time, but it could get done I could get these workouts done faster than I thought I could, number one. But number two, the opposite happened in terms of my energy levels, where I thought that I was going to be depleting myself. What has proven to be the case is that through this exercise, through working out, I have more energy. And sometimes it's like I'm literally like bouncing off the walls. It's fascinating, and it's fascinating to observe. But all that to say that if I would have gotten stuck in those aspects of my life script, those stories, those justifications for not responding to what my body was telling me, which was, this is not, and listen, the truth is that I would look in the mirror and see my body age and think, this is not going in the right direction. And if I don't do something about it, rather, it's just going to keep going in that direction. So if I hadn't responded to it the way I did 2.5 years ago, who knows? Who knows what my health would be like? Who knows what my body would look like? And I'm less concerned with how it looks, but I'm more concerned with how I feel in it. I know that at the moment, or in that moment when I made the choice to go to the gym and give it another shot, I wasn't feeling great. I was feeling, like every day I woke up and there was another new ache or pain. And for the first, I don't know, however long that happened, I just sort of thought, oh, that's aging. That's aging, just complete denial and justification. And then at a certain point, I was like, no, you know what? Like, I can't just let this happen. I've got to at least meet it. I've got to respond to it. It doesn't, I thought at that point, it doesn't matter if how I respond to it changes it, but I've got to do something. It was a call to action, and I answered that call, and I'll forever be grateful that I answered that call because it's become a way of life for me. But what I'm saying is that we are conditioned to believe that we should not respond to what the body tells us, that we should ignore the signals that it sends us. How does this happen? I want to give you examples of how we do this. For starters, how many of you have gone to work when you were sick? How many of you have felt that it was more important for you to show up at work and not be absent, despite the fact that you had a cold or you had a flu or you had something else going on, but that was less important than showing up at work and being present so that you didn't get into trouble? I mean, that's, to me, one of the most insidious ways that we're conditioned to believe that it's okay to ignore what your body is telling you, and more importantly, to not give it what it needs. I've seen this with more than just people showing up for work. I've seen this with people who still go out, right? They still feel the pressure to go out with their friends. They still feel the pressure, whether that's self-imposed or not, to work out, to go to the gym. How many times? I mean, listen, I'm like vigilant about spraying down machines and before and after I use them because I know, I've seen it. And to be honest, I've done it in moments where I thought I was better, but I still went out to the gym and I wasn't fully healed. I know that there's tons of things that I could pick up there because people haven't given themselves the opportunity to just stay home and rest and recover. What about people who still go to yoga class? I mean, listen, I teach these yoga classes and I want the rooms that I occupy for this purpose to be safe spaces, to be trusted spaces, and I don't want people to think that they're not welcome. However, I also know that on a busy day, there could be 45 people aside from me in that room, in the yoga room, in the yoga studio. And if one person comes in with something that's transmittable, or something that's contagious, I don't want 40 people or 39 other people to get it because they wanted to come to yoga and one person who wasn't well was pushing themselves to come to yoga for whatever reason. I don't really talk about this often because, again, I don't want to traumatize people. I don't want to have people think that they're not welcome, but this is a thing. I really want people to know that, for starters, if you are ill, stay home. Your body needs the rest, and the yoga practice, at least the vinyasa practice, is not rest. Number one. Number two, you're giving it to other people. By going into a yoga environment or a gym or any other public environment with whatever you have that's contagious, you're just spreading it. So why would you do that? So, we typically push ourselves to stick to the regimes that we're used to. What about people who overwork themselves, who don't pay attention to the signs of fatigue? So instead, they push themselves, they show up at work, they show up for whatever they've signed up for, and that's just a testament to how hard we are on ourselves. But let's also talk about how our culture has encouraged that, right? All of the energy drinks that are available, the Red Bulls, all of that. How about all the coffee shops? How about like the rise of the coffee culture? How on every corner there's a coffee shop. How it seems like the millennial generation is defined by coffee culture. And this coffee culture, this caffeine culture, this push beyond your boundaries and ignore your fatigue culture is what leads to burnout. It's what leads to people feeling isolated, people feeling unhappy with the way their lives are going, because they know on some level that they are out of their depth. And yet these stimulants help them stay out of their depths and survive somehow. But listen, what goes up must come down. There is a crash waiting for anybody who is, riding that wave. And yet it seems like it's been normalized by our culture to just go out there and find whatever stimulant you can to keep yourself going, to keep yourself productive, to keep yourself running at a pace that is not only unattainable, I think, but not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And yet that seems to be the race that everybody is running. Well, listen, I personally, for myself, refuse to run that race. I completely reject it. And I think that we need to be more vocal about, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm done. And you know what? Because I'm done, I'm not going to be playing that game, and I'm not going to be coming into work, and I am going to take a day off or 2 days off of the gym and, not let it bother me to the point where I think that I'm doing something wrong. There is nothing wrong with letting the body rest at all. What about people who overwork and they actually overwork the number of hours they work in a day, so they don't take enough hours to sleep, and then the next day they just get up and do it again and over and over and over again. I mean, we see this in Japan. I just saw a documentary on Japan where they were showing that culture of overworking, how your career is more important than your own well-being. What about people who don't pay attention to that muscular lockdown that occurs in their bodies due to stress? People who don't pay attention to the signs of stress accumulating in the body as the muscular holding patterns start to solidify. And then gradually it changes posture. And there are arguments that say that gradually, if those muscular holding patterns, that muscular lockdown isn't released, or if it isn't shifted, whether it be through speaking to someone else or whether it be through some sort of physical exercise that moves that part of the body, that it ends up contributing on a cellular level to disease, to dis-ease. The body begins in dis-ease and potentially starts to display signs of disease, because we haven't been paying attention to it. What about people who eat badly, right? And don't nourish the body, understanding what it needs, which is live, whole, wholesome food, not just dead food that has no, energy that is helpful, or as we would say in spiritual or in yoga and Hindu circles, pranic energy. It has no life force. We live in fast food culture, and fast food culture has proven to be the most cost-effective for people, right? So it is cheaper to eat bad food, and that's okay. For some reason, we are contributing to a society that makes it harder for us to eat healthier because the healthier food is more expensive. So what is attainable for the masses? Fast food. And what is in fast food? Tons of byproduct, stuff that is not actual food, and they put that in their bodies and don't think twice about it. And their bodies start to show signs of again, dis-ease, whether that be excess weight or not enough weight, whether it be the tone of the skin, whether it be the texture of the skin, whether it be just the way they feel. I mean, when you don't eat real food, chances are you're not going to feel as good as if you were feeding the body with real food. And listen, I'm not going to go into a vegan diet versus a vegetarian diet versus a meat-eating diet. I don't care. I don't care what you do with your diet, but do it, whatever you do, however you eat, do it because it works for you and it contributes to your well-being and you being as, I guess, content as you can be in the skin that you're in. How about people who ignore the signs of hunger because they're starving themselves so that their body can fit an ideal or supposedly ideal aesthetic? Right? How many actresses have I spoken to who have told me that they are starving, that they starve on purpose because they need to be a size whatever, a size 4 or a size 6 or a size 2 or a size -40, I don't know. But they're actually not feeding the body what the body needs in order to continue to perform at the level it needs to perform because they need to look a certain way. And how about the people who actually physically alter their body through surgery, through other invasive procedures in order for the body to look the way it's supposed to look, not paying attention to the fact that that's a lot of pain. It's a lot of trauma for the body to absorb and to recover from. But what about the people who also not just like, deprive themselves of food, but how about the people who overeat and ignore the signs of being full because they're, maybe somehow anesthetizing unprocessed emotions, unprocessed trauma, unprocessed rather thoughts. Or how about this? Because their eyes are bigger than their stomach is and they can't stop eating if the food is in front of them. I mean, listen, I have been that guy where, my eyes are massive and the food in front of me looks delicious and I'm just eating and eating and eating. And yet my body has been sending me signals that it's full for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but I keep going. Why would I do that to myself? I know from experience, I try not to do it anymore, but I know from experience that if I do that, that's when I feel like my liver struggle to digest or to at least to process all the food that's going through it. My stomach gets distended, just that bloated feeling, acid reflux, all of that. I mean, that's simply because I couldn't just stop eating, really. I mean, ridiculous. What about, thirst? What about not paying attention to the signs of thirst and not drinking tons and tons and tons of water to feed the body with what it needs, on a liquid level, as opposed to quenching the thirst with drinks that, contain essentially poisons for the body. All of the carbonated drinks that are essentially just like sugar that are, again, amping the body up and producing false energy that one will crash massively from after that energy has been expended. How about people who, and I've done this as well, I used to do this a lot when I was in school, how about people who maybe drink, right? But they don't want to drink too much because if they drink too much, and I'm talking water, they drink too much, they're going to have to pee. And they don't want to have to pee, so they either don't drink the water or they do drink the water and then they hold it. They don't go to the bathroom to urinate when they need to urinate because the time isn't convenient because you're focusing on something else, you're doing something else. It doesn't feel that urgent until all of a sudden it is that urgent and like you can barely even stand up straight to get there. How about that? All of these ways, I believe everything I've said here, everything is common to every single one of us. We have all lived one of those moments. I think that it is absolutely fascinating that we're not talking about this more. I think it's absolutely fascinating that we live in this culture of work and work and work, and let that work dictate your worth and let that productivity dictate your value. I think it is like it's like praying to false gods, because ultimately those things, I don't know, somebody may give you a pat on the back because they're trying to make a buck off of it, but I don't think those things end up contributing to being happy or being peaceful or being content or being healthy. I think that the best thing that we can do for our own well-being and for our own health is start to pay attention to the body and start to pay attention to what the body is telling us and respond to it. Really honestly respond to it. Now, something that I also wanted to talk about is the concept that in spirituality and in Hinduism, we learn that you are not your body. And so it's very easy for people who follow these paths of spiritual study to almost detach from their body and not even be able to clock what the signals are that the body is sending them, because they have been studying for so long to pay attention to the energy that animates the body and divert attention away from the body itself. Listen, I understand the concept of identifying as energy and not the body itself, and the body simply being the vessel that embodies and carries this energy out into the world and allows this energy to express itself through the body. I get it. I totally get it. However, it doesn't mean that if the body's telling me something, I'm going to completely ignore it because I'm not the body. I'm the energy in the body. So I'm not going to pay attention to whatever the body's telling me because it's not real. All that's real is this energy. Bullshit. We have got to wake up and we have got to have our feet on the ground while having our heads in the sky. This is, a term that I coined, or at least that I've been using for years and years and years. We have to be able to survive in this world and pay attention to the material world and pay our taxes and pay our mortgages or rents and be, part of this game of life. And you can see it as game of life or you can see it as everything, but whatever. We have to do that. That's the way it is. Too bad. However, we can also have a deeply, deeply rooted spiritual practice. Those two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. In fact, I think that they make really good, companions, to be honest. But, this kind of spiritual bypass that tells us, well, I'm the energy in the body. I'm identifying as the energy in the body and not the body itself. And then all of a sudden we go through this whole life crisis because there's illness and disease that we have to respond to. And then we start asking, well, why? I did everything I was supposed to do, and I have the spiritual practice, and I believe that we're all one, and why would the suffering come to me? Listen, like it or not, we are energetic beings in these human bodies, living this human experience that we can, infuse with the spiritual experience, but it's happening. And these bodies, are fallible. That's the way it goes. Regardless of where you're from, regardless of what your background is, regardless of how privileged or not you have or have not been, one of the greatest equalizers in our world, in this experience, is, well, there are two: suffering and bodily death. These things are. They just are. And so I think that it's essential that we understand that we need to be in relationship with all of it, especially the body. We need to be more connected to what the body is telling us and to respond to it. And listen, we can respond to it with spiritual tools and spiritual systems, but it doesn't negate the fact that if the body is telling us something, it's telling us something for a reason. What comes up in the body as sensation is typically a messenger. And it's typically just waving a flag saying, check this out. You're hungry, eat something. You're thirsty, drink something. You're exhausted, rest. You're stressed, relax. That kind of thing. And yet we are being led by a culture that I guess has us believe that all that stuff isn't important. What's important? Well, make money, create physical material abundance. And if you don't drop dead in the process, then good for you. Well done, you win. Well, you know what? I'm not taking that. I reject that. I think we should all reject that. I would like to hear from you ways that I haven't gone over yet, ways in which you have sort of disidentified or unidentified from the body, disconnected from the body, not paid attention to what it was telling you. I have a few people in my life who have told me, who have suffered through, let's say, cancer and cancer treatment, who have made comments to me like, life was whispering to me through the body. I was getting signals and I didn't pay attention to them. And those whispers started to get louder. Words started to come up, sentences. I ignored them. Then things started to get a little bit louder, like a little bit of yelling, a little bit of shouting. I ignored it. And then all of a sudden there was screaming. And all of a sudden there was this cancer. And all of a sudden I had no choice but to deal. I would like to sort of put out there that we have the option as to whether or not to deal. And I would suggest that we learn to deal sooner than later so that we're dealing with fatigue and we're dealing with hunger and we're dealing with stress and we're dealing with thirst before we're dealing with blood disorders and cancers and, the stuff that scares us. I think that it is our responsibility to take care of these bodies that we find ourselves in. When we don't, we're taught by the Bhagavad Gita from Hinduism that when you harm the body, you harm the energy that animates it, that spiritual contracted form of whatever you uniquely believe God to be, or energy to be, or life or consciousness to be. So let's stop harming ourselves. Let's start taking care of the physical, understanding it is equally important as the spiritual, or rather equally as important as the spiritual and energetic is. It's all meant to be part of the same full spectrum 360-degree model of health and wellness. So let's begin now. I want to hear from you how you have, ignored or not been in a healthy relationship with the body, if I haven't already gone over ways that you identify with or that you've lived through. But I really want you to give it a think. I want you to really give it a think as to how right now you aren't listening to the body, or how you're ignoring the signals that the body is sending to you. And ask, how can I make tiny little baby steps? How can I take these baby steps towards listening and nourishing and maybe taking a little bit better care of the body than you have been doing? Give it a think, and I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.